We're here to talk about ShotSpotter.
Okay.
Some people might not know about it. What is ShotSpotter? How does it work?
So ShotSpotter is a gunshot detection system, and what it does is it picks up the percussion of a fired round, and it's able to triangulate and identify that specific location where that round was fired. And it gives us the ability to respond to just about the exact location where that round was fired from, allows us to collect evidence, potentially make arrests of involved suspects, tend to victims that may be at the scene.
Why is it helpful to DPD to have this? Some folks might say, well, I don't have 911. Why do you need
Well,
this?
the reason why it's helpful is because honestly, our data shows that anywhere from 80 to 90% of our gunshot detection alerts don't have a corresponding 911 call. And so often we don't get a 911 call. And then when we do get a 911 call, often that call is not very exact. You know, they heard a shot. They don't know if it was, you know, behind them to the north, to the south. They really don't know, whereas ShotSpotter can give us a pretty exact location.
Last week we saw it kind of in action happening with this shooting on Colfax. Walk me through how ShotSpotter played a role in that.
So the reason why it played such a significant role in that particular case is because there were a number of rounds that were fired. Our ShotSpotter technology that's in place there in that East Colfax neighborhood picked it up. There was an alert that was immediately sent to officers, and it actually was sent to officers before the 911 call was even placed. So there was a 911 call that was placed in relation to that specific incident, but officers were actually already on the way because of the alert from ShotSpotter.
How do they get that alert, and what do they do when they get an alert?
So every officer has that particular system. There's a program on their phones as well as on their mobile data terminals in their vehicles, and it's also in dispatch. And so dispatch will get an alert, and then the officers will actually get an alert pushed directly to their device. And so they can actually use that device to direct them to the exact, you know, coordinates of where that particular gunshot was fired. And so again, they can be on the way to that location before a 911 call is even processed.
In an incident like what happened in Colfax, where you have 6 victims,
Mm-hmm.
how important is it to have officers already moving that direction, knowing that there are people who may be injured in these kind of things?
Well, I mean, certainly because of the fact that there's a great potential that there could be people that are injured, significantly injured. You know, we can make sure that they are transported to the hospital. We can make sure that ambulances are on the way to tend to those victims. And there may be evidence that could be recovered. There may be witnesses still on scene that we can make contact with and make sure that we get valuable information from them.
Time is the essence in cases.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I know there was more money allocated this year, an expansion of the program, a renewal of the contract. Why do you think it's important, or do you think it's important for Denver to continue using this? Do you think there's an opportunity to expand?
Well, it's a data-driven project, and so I believe that the neighborhoods that ShotSpotter is currently in, the data shows that it needs to be there. You know, there's a lot of gun violence that occurs in these particular neighborhoods, and so it's very helpful in our efforts to quell those violent crimes. There are certainly neighborhoods that would like to see ShotSpotter added to their neighborhood. They have concerns about their safety as well. But we have to be very prudent, I think, about the expenditure of those funds because it is very expensive technology.
How do you decide where to spend it?
Well, it really does come down to the data. You know, the neighborhoods that are experiencing the greatest amounts of gun violence are the neighborhoods that the data shows that it should be.
We talked about this shooting on Colfax because it's one that stood out to us as an incident where ShotSpotter kind of maybe played a role. Are there, in your mind, when you think of how this technology helps, what is the scenario that you see this really playing a critical role in?
Well, I can think of instances where, two instances really. So there are certainly instances where there is no corresponding 911 call, and so had there not been ShotSpotter, we wouldn't have even known to respond. And so there have been instances where there was no corresponding 911 call. We responded only to the ShotSpotter alert and was able to arrive on scene and identify victims and get them to treatment. There's been locations where, or instances where There was a corresponding 911 call, but the location that they provided to us was not exact. And in fact, had we relied only on the 911 call, we probably wouldn't have found the victim. But because the officers dispatched themselves directly to the exact location that the ShotSpotter technology told them to go to, they were actually able to discover the victim in a place that couldn't even have been observed from the street.
This is just one tool that the police department uses, especially in some crime hotspot areas. How do you kind of put this in context for us of where this sits in terms of the number of tools that you use and the importance of the different tools you have?
It's just one piece. You know, it's certainly just one piece. You know, it is tied to our ability to look at shell casings and make connections with shell casings, connecting crimes in one area to maybe crimes in another area. It often allows us to identify suspects in crimes that have occurred some time ago, because we know that there's a connection between the weapon that was used in today's crime in an incident that occurred some time ago.
Because you're able to collect that evidence at
Correct.
the scene.
Yeah.
Because I imagine most of these ShotSpotter calls, you know, that officers may go to, there's not a shooting or a victim necessarily. Maybe there are some casings, or maybe there's nothing at the scene. But do officers have some kind of investigative role when they see cases?
They
on
do.
the ground?
They do. And so whenever they respond to a ShotSpotter alert, they are looking for shell casings. If there is no suspect to arrest, if there is no victim to tend to, they are looking for those shell casings. And again, the preciseness of the technology allows them to find those shell casings. And so they collect the shell casings, turn them over to the lab. The lab has a process to evaluate them and then compare them to other shell casings that have been recovered. And again, it's very valuable in helping us solve a lot of crimes.
You hear from some officers that this has got to be something that's annoying, right? You got to go to all these different calls. So many of these calls come through. Is there an element of sometimes this is just overwhelming to have to respond to all of these ShotSpotter alerts that, you know, maybe don't turn out to be anything?
I don't think that's their take on things. I think that they do find value in being able to locate shell casings, being able to go to an exact location, and I think they see the value in being able to make connections between you know, one incident and another incident. And so I think that they find, you know, value in being able to be precise about their response.
We've seen some controversy in this community and others about saying, you know, this is targeted at certain neighborhoods and certain areas. What do you say to folks who say, yeah, I don't want ShotSpotter in my neighborhood?
Well, I've never heard somebody say that they don't want ShotSpotter in their neighborhood, to be perfectly frank. In fact, I've gone to communities all over the city where they would prefer to have ShotSpotter in their neighborhood, but the data just doesn't inform us that that it's necessary in that particular neighborhood. So you know, while it's it may be true that it's that this technology is employed in primarily minority neighborhoods, that's where the violence is occurring, unfortunately. And so I think it's prudent for us to follow the data and put the technology where it's going to be most helpful.
I just have a couple more questions for you. One is in general about the ShotSpotter technology. What else do you think folks need to know? What else do you think is important for people to understand about this?
Well, I think that what's important, I think, for folks to know is that this is really a technology that we're using to help the community. You know, one, we really do think it's important to recover evidence. We really do think it's important to be able to go directly to where we may locate a victim so that we can get aid to them very quickly. And that this is not directed at types of communities. This is very data directed, and the data you know, shows us exactly where this technology needs to be employed.
And then I want to kind of route this back to this Colfax shooting we saw last week where we had 6 people. I mean, do you think ShotSpotter made a difference in this case? There was a 911 call too.
Well, I do, because we got there even faster, you know, and minutes, seconds count. And so the fact that we were able to be on the way before that call was even placed, I think was helpful.
And then more generally about the shooting in Colfax, obviously there are still suspects out there? Or is there any progress in the investigation that you can give us? Any updates on the conditions of the other?
I can't give any updates on the investigation. I can tell you that it is still an active investigation. We do have a significant number of leads that we're following up on, and so we're certainly hopeful that we will get resolution in this particular case.
I don't know if you happen to know this. Of the victims, we heard 2 were released from the hospital, 3 were still critical last week. Do you know if any others have been released or anything like that?
I don't believe any others have been released, so I think those conditions are still the same.
Tom, anything else?
But they're all expected to survive.
Yeah.
That is correct, yes.
I was just going to fire off a quick question about, you have these spot shooters, and what does it say about the city that we need them and that they're so successful?
Well, there's a lot of gun violence that occurs in the city, unfortunately, and I think it's unfortunate that there are so many folks that are possessing guns that are inclined to use guns to resolve conflict. But I think it's really our charge, I think, to identify these folks that are preying on our community and remove them from the community.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Sure, thank you.